What is up, guys? Welcome back to CageChat MMA. We're here to discuss 4 fights that I think should be happening after UFC 258. Now, of course, before we get into the video, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Make sure to go follow the socials at CageChat MMA on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and now, of course, Twitch. Now, let's get into it. At UFC 258, we saw, of course, Kamaru Usman make his third successful title defense against Gilbert Burns in a very dominant fashion, and it set up quite the argument about who is going to fight him next. He seems so dominant, so elite, almost on a pedestal of his own. And obviously, there's a lot of talk about, is he the greatest of all time? Now, I think he's surpassed Tyron Woodley now. Personally, I think the performance he's put in, 2 finishes and a dominant performance against Jorge Masvidal, who of course he called out at the end of the bout in his post-fight interview with Joe Rogan. I think he's climbing that gate. Of course, he broke the record for GSP's consecutive wins as an active fighter in the welterweight division. He's now leading the pack on 13. But for me, I think the fight's already been made. It's Jorge Masvidal, isn't it? You know, we saw the call out by Kamaru Usman, and it's not often we see the champion calling out names, unless it's, you know, the division above, the division below sort of thing, where we go in the champ. It's not too often. Obviously, he's the one with his target on his back, and he's got, you know, a whole division, you know, aiming fire at him almost. You got, you know, Leon Edwards wanted the title shot. You want Colby Compton wanted the title shot. You've got Gilbert Burns just coming off the title shot, of course. So everyone's aiming at Kamaru Usman, and it seems like, you know, a sensible fight to make, at least in a business sense, albeit maybe not a sporting purist sort of aspect or a competition aspect. Because obviously Masvidal was coming off that loss to Kamaru Usman, but when the champ calls you out, you know, it would be silly not to make that fight, wouldn't it? Especially with the Ultimate Fighter coming back, it would be, you know, amazing to see those two back as coaches. Many thought it would be Covington and Masvidal being coaches, but now with Hamza Chimaev not fighting Leon Edwards due to injury or COVID-related issues, should we say, you know, Leon Edwards, Colby Compton seem to be fighting, and that means Masvidal, you know, is left without an opponent. And when Usman called him out, I think, one, the UFC saw dollar signs. I think Usman's seen dollar signs, but he's also seen, you know, he also wants to go into the kill. I think, you know, he has got those 2 finishes, and, you know, I relate back to when Nate Diaz and Masvidal fought at UFC 244. Of course, Masvidal came out in the octagon and said, you know, I wanted to baptize and I didn't do my job. You know, the doctors came in and stopped him almost, and that he'd run it back. And I think Usman's coming along the same path. He didn't get to finish Masvidal like he did Covington, like he did Burns. You know, he despises Covington. He got that respect and that, you know, that competitive edge over Gilbert Burns because their time training together. But with Masvidal, it seems a bit weird. There seems to be a lot of animosity to the fact that, you know, Masvidal, you know, took the fight on 6 days' notice. I think Usman seems a little bit discredited that he also took the fight on short notice too, having trained, you know, weeks to Gilbert Burns, having to you know, change sort of sites to Masvidal. Obviously, the whole flying from Vegas back towards home, you know, he changed camps, obviously going with Trevor Whitman, and I think he wants to get the job done for good this time. And maybe he sees him not as an easy fight, but an easier fight, maybe. Especially with being in there once, he's probably thinking, Colby Compton took me 4.5 rounds, you know, Gilbert Burns is a teammate of mine, Leon Edwards is on a hot streak, but again, he hasn't quite got a name. So Masvidal is the fight probably to make. You know, the last one made 1.3 million pay-per-view buys. I don't think this one would make that much. I think it would be in the 700, 800,000. But again, maybe Masvidal has got that sort of name and stature now where he does break 1 million pay-per-view buys every time he fights. And I can see probably that's quite, you know, lucrative to Kamaru Usman, as well as getting a 4th title defense and finally putting a nail in that coffin between their two's rivalry. So yes, for me, the first one is quite an obvious one. Usman versus Masvidal to make it for July or August. I don't know when, you know. I think shooting starts for the Ultimate Fighter. Obviously, he keeps getting pushed back with, you know, fights breaking through with COVID situations and whatnot. But I think let's see that fight in September. And that leads us on nicely to the challenger, Gilbert Burns, who didn't get the job done on Saturday night. But I think, you know, he has to fight Stephen Thompson for me. He has to fight Wonderboy. We know now, or we seemingly know that Compton and Leon Edwards is in the works, probably for late March, April maybe. I know Edwards wants to fight on that March 13th card that he was set to fight on, and maybe Kobe Compton steps in there, but I don't think that quite happens. I think they want to probably make that for mid-April as a 5-round main event, perhaps. I thought it would be a 5-round main event, but they might want to give Kobe Compton a little bit more time. We don't know. So for me, Thompson is the only one who's not, he's the only one without a fight at the moment. He was hurt after that Jeff Neal fight on December 19th, where he looked fantastic, and he has become a little bit of a gatekeeper to get into that top 5, and no one seems to be able to beat him below him. He looked fantastic against Vicente Luque. So for me, give them Gilbert Burns. Gilbert Burns is going to want to test himself after coming out saying he got overexcited, overagitated. He reacted quite. He overreacted to that knockdown that he gave Usman in the first round. It cost him the fight, perhaps. Well, it definitely cost him the fight, you could say. And it'd be interesting to see if he can iron out those tests against someone like Wonderboy, because you can't be striking and pushing everything and putting everything into those strikes, because Wonderboy's just not going to be there, and he's just going to pick you up with his jab and his kicks, and he's got fantastic movement, fantastic managing distance. But equally, it could be very similar to the Anthony Pettis fight, where you're seeing, maybe Wonderboy's got this 2 rounds in, 3 rounds in, and boom, you see, as you see Burns knock out Thompson, and you get him back in the win column, and then you got that little bit of highlight reel, that little bit of that video that goes trending on social media, and they'll go, oh, maybe he's ready for another title shot. Let's give it to him at the end of the year, or this time next year perhaps. But again, there was a lot of talk about Thompson's the only one who's not fought Usman yet inside the top 5. Edwards is thought lost. They've all lost to Kamaru Usman, obviously. Stephen Thompson the only one who's not. And if Thompson was to beat someone like Burns, someone in that top 5, if he fought Leon Edwards and beat Leon Edwards, I think he could make that title fight. I think that would be quite an obvious one to make at that point. But for me, give him Gilbert Burns, and let's see that litmus test. Let's see what Burns is made of coming off the loss. He's looked phenomenal up until that fight, and he looked good in that first round against Usman as well at the weekend. As someone else looked equally as good, well, I say equally as good as Usman, maybe not equally as good as Burns, Kelvin Gastelum, obviously beat Ian Heinisch. And for me, I think it's time for him to start looking up again at that division, not looking behind him, as he was, in a bit of a free fall going down that division. He's currently, 8th or 9th in that division. Still, Ian Heinisch has been pushed down outside the top 15 after that loss. And for me, I think you book him against Jared Cannonier, obviously. Cannonier's coming off that loss to Robert Whittaker, and Whittaker's dying Paulo Costa, Vittori's dying Teal. It's only really Cannonier and Jack Manson who's already got a win over Kelvin Gastelum, and you could reboot that fight and say it was a lucky heel hook. You can build that narrative that he has a bit of a fluke, but you don't want to see Kelvin Gastelum lose that fight in a similar fashion once more. So for me personally, I would like to see Kelvin Gastelum versus Jared Cannonier. It's a good main card on a pay-per-view fight. It's probably in that same sort of position between the main and the co-main. It's a good sort of like build up to that co-main and main event. Both of them are going to bring it. Obviously, Jared Cannonier, former heavyweight. You got Gastelum, former welterweight, coming up into middleweight. You got the knockout power that you see from Cannonier and how ferocious he is. He's the dark horse of that division. Albeit, he lost to the former champion Robert Whittaker. That's no sort of harm done on his record. Obviously, it's a step back from the champion Israel Adesanya. But again, Kelvin Gastelum gave Adesanya his probably his toughest fight in the UFC. Maybe bar Marvin Vettori, of course. So yeah, let's give Gastelum a shot there. Obviously, you got Derek Brunson fighting Kevin Holland. You got Uriah Hall, Chris Weidman happening as well in April, I believe, or maybe late March. So it is only really him, Hansen or Cannonier, and for me, I'd rather see him face Cannonier as a fresh matchup and a fight that I think you got wrestler versus striker there, and I think that would be a phenomenal bout for the pair of them. And it'd be interesting to see how the mental side of Gastelum's game has evolved. Obviously, he looked a lot better. He seems to have fixed maybe what was causing those losses, those 3 fight losses that he had. And I do think Adesanya broke him a little bit mentally, but I think he's probably put that into place. He's fixed that. He had a tough 2019. Then he obviously that split decision loss to Darren Till. Tried to come back last year, and obviously it didn't work out against Jack Manson. So yeah, Gastelum Cannonier is the fight for me to make. And that leads us to Alexa Grasso Of course, she got the win and the co-main against Macy Barber, handed her a second professional loss, and she looked phenomenal on the feet, didn't she? She took some strikes of her own, showed that she's got a tough chin, and she also showed how good she is in the transitions between grappling and jiu-jitsu and her wrestling, and that's really catching up to her striking game, which is probably her outliers, her best sort of weapon, you could say. And DC's come out and said, in detail on Awani, that she might be the best pure boxer in women's MMA, which is a bold claim, but she looked phenomenal. That jab was on point. That left hook that connected with Macy Barber was fantastic. But I'd be interested to see how that ground game has evolved, and just how much I think it's Diego Lopez, the coach who she's been working with, and that's why I put up her against Roxanne Modafferi thrown outside. I think Modafferi, coming off the back of the poor decision loss in her last fight. Grasso on the way up, you could say that Modafferi again is becoming a staple holder of the flyweight division. She's a veteran in that division now, and maybe becoming a gatekeeper. She wins almost when you expect her to lose, and she loses when you expect her to win, you could say. She's almost the Donald Cerrone of that division, you could, with all due respect to both competitors, because they're absolutely legends. But Grasso is number 10 now. She's going to be looking to end the year in that top 5, looking to build on a title charge next year, whether that's against Valentina Shevchenko, if she's still champion. You'd probably, bet your house on that she is. But again, this sport is so perfectly unpredictable that, you could see Jessica Andrade carrying gold at the end of 2021. You got Jonathan Meyer, Lauren Murphy in there, Catelyn Chicago, and of course, Cynthia Calvillo. Joan Corder was back in the win column, of course. But for me, it was between Modafferi and Jessica Rai, and Jessica Rai, I think, has a, there's not a definitive sort of outlier in terms of what would make this fight exciting. Whereas I'd like to see, what happens when Grasso and Modafferi clinch up. Does Modafferi have the power? Obviously, we know that Grasso is stronger in striking game, but also how has Modafferi's game evolved? Her striking game, whether it's Syndicate MMA, it has got better. It looked a lot better in her last fight, but she just, wasn't quite ingrained and quite confident enough to use it. And Vivian Araujo was just better on the night. So for me, Alexa Grasso versus Modafferi is the fight to make. Grasso came out and said that she was a veteran, as she thought, a 22-year-old at the weekend, and it'd be interesting to see the tables turn, see her, the younger fighter in the cage again, and I think it'd be a good experience for her to fight someone like Modafferi, and it really, even more, cement her status in this division. She's got 2 impressive wins now in the weight class, and a win over a veteran like Roxanne Modafferi would certainly, put her in good stead for 2021. So yes, that is my top 4 fights to make after UFC 258. Let me know your sort of matchmaking thoughts in the comments down below. Do you want to see Usman fight next? How do you want to see Burns fight back? Is it right to see Usman versus Masvidal 2 from a sporting perspective, you could say? What's next to Gastelum after getting back in the win column? Of course, Alexa Grasso. What's next to her? An astonishing flyweight contender on the up and coming now, and certainly cemented her name in that division, as we've said before. And who else on the card would you like to see? Let us know. Julian Marquez had a good fight. Ricky Simone got in the win column. So who would you like to see them fight next? Of course, if I've missed anyone, let us know in the comments down below. Make sure to hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. Make sure to go follow the socials at CageChat MMA on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and Twitch. Of course, now launched on Twitch now. And I will see you guys on the next video.